Welcome everyone to another episode of Reimagining Cyber. Rob Aragao here. And this week I thought I'd share a little perspective on shadow AI in general. And the reason why I'm considering that topic for today is driven by what I saw come out of the AI Action Summit that was held in Paris just a couple of weeks back, which covers obviously a vast majority of AI related areas of focus. But from my perspective, it's shining the light on the elements that came out of it with a focus, of course, on cybersecurity. And there were probably a handful or so kind of core areas that I saw in the briefings. And when you think about these things, it's conversations that you've heard us talk about in the podcast, definitely over the past year in this topic of AI. But I'll start with kind of giving you the summary. In essence, the conversation topic around how AI is helping, but also potentially harming with cybersecurity concerns is definitely one that we've discussed in the past. And it talks about obviously how AI has been able to enhance, right, threat detection, specifically incident response, as kind of some core areas of focus. But it's also obviously driven the attackers and the sophisticated attackers definitely to be that much more impactful in the types of security issues that we're seeing relative to their use of tools with AI kind of built into them. But also then again, just how we're able to drive that into the conversations that we're having and the need to better our cyber practices and cyber hygiene to effectively use what we have for AI tooling out there today. The other area is really around kind of the governance and regulation aspect, as you can imagine. So taking into account, really getting a good assessment and understanding of what different frameworks are there available. We've seen, some things here in the US that NIST has come out with some pretty good kind of, leading perspectives on frameworks to consider on your adoption of AI with the cyber, of course, focus on that. But also then we've seen with the EU AI Act as another driving force that's going on again from a global view perspective as a whole. So just getting your arms kind of wrapped around and understanding, where that plays a key role for each of the different organizations that we're tied to and supporting and kind of what impact that may have on us. One of the other areas that I thought was really interesting is the consistent calling out for and need to collaborate further and in essence, sharing, right? Information sharing. We've had some great conversations in the past about the need for better sharing across organizations, across governments, and just with all of the new cybersecurity challenges that are getting amplified due to AI, it's definitely an area, again, that we're revisiting and a major focus, again, on that sharing of intelligence, threat intelligence specifically, best practices that each organizations are starting to implement to help them with getting their arms better wrapped around AI as a whole. And then was discussions as related to how the cybersecurity defenses are starting to see some value as it relates to automated threat detection. And I mentioned earlier, right, the improving on response time. So incident response times being that much more effective. So that's the top level, right, that we've seen coming out of, again, this summit that took place in Paris a couple of weeks ago, the AI Action Summit specifically, which got me thinking that whole theme of shadow AI. And we've seen this for many years as it relates to the concept of shadow IT, right? The organizations that are out there and having different kind of functions within lines of business, spinning up different applications, right? With all these different SaaS applications made available to them, they would just take it on their own to say, yeah, that's going to help us for our particular function that we support the business for. And therefore, we'll go ahead and sign up out of our own budget. We will leverage that solution. We don't have to worry about IT, getting involved to manage something. So therefore, we just kind of go do this on ourselves. And obviously that causes all sorts of angst for the IT organization, for the cyber organization, because they're not aware that this has happened in many cases, right? So that's the whole kind of same issue that we saw with shadow IT now driven around shadow AI. And so there's many different challenges when you put that, again, cyber focus lens on this topic, right? We have issues as it relates to data that's being used that may not be proper to use for AI initiatives. You have very likely concerns around unauthorized access to that data as well, right? So a lot of these shadow AI systems that are getting stood up may be bypassing established access control mechanisms you have that are really helping you better manage your sensitive data, as an example, right, in more secure environments. There's no question that the attack surface becomes that much bigger with different aspects of how these shadow AI systems are starting to come online, especially when it comes to third-party cloud service offerings that are out there. You have the issues as it relates to extending that third-party relationship, and it ties back into really the supply chain risk that we've discussed in the past as well, which means as you're signing up, or parts of the organization may be signing up for these AI offerings, you have the risks associated to whomever that third-party vendor is. And are their security practices really up to snuff, right? Have they been vetted through the normal process as you would typically today if you're going to be doing, for example, a SaaS-based contract, right? You're leveraging some SaaS-based solutions. Your teams know how to go through and review the details and the specific security requirements that need to be in place for that SaaS vendor's solution to be one that you would approve your organization to actually use, right? So this shadow AI issue is kind of, again, as I mentioned earlier, similar to what we dealt with in the past for shadow IT, for sure. And we need to really get, again, our arms wrapped better around it. Another key challenge that we've seen within the cyber side of this shadow AI issue is exfiltration of data, right? This confidential data that may just be sitting out there, made then available through some of these external AI services, not being monitored properly, not being secured or encrypted effectively. So again, it's all of these other concerning issues that we from a cyber and even a technology team have to take into consideration, where people in the organization aren't really considering that. They're thinking about, wow, this is cool new AI solution that's out there. We're going to sign up for it, and then going to start using and leveraging our data to give us information because we're trying to identify new areas of opportunity and efficiency gains that we can gather. All good, I get it, but the ramifications around cyber data privacy are absolutely all in play. And then there's another area that people aren't considering at all, which is very likely there's not a lot of good in-depth, proper security testing that's going on of those solutions themselves, right? And so, you may not know about, again, this AI offering that you've got signed up somewhere within the organization and don't have any great ways of being able to understand how to target it effectively for maybe standard pen testing, vulnerability assessments that you're conducting. So there's many more, but those are some specific areas, if you will, that I would call out as key challenges around today, what we're seeing for shadow AI. There's also, though, things to take into consideration, of course, and how to potentially deal with them better, get your arms wrapped around it. And I'll look at it in the frame of, again, cybersecurity as well as data privacy issues when it comes to shadow AI. And so if you think about governance as a whole, right, one of the things that we're starting to see organizations create, we have done that for quite some time, actually, is a center of excellence focused on AI. And what that does is allows you to properly evaluate and approve AI-specific solutions. It puts the right boundaries in place, the right policies are defined, implemented, measured effectively. And it also, very critical, allows you to ensure that you're thinking about, again, from a governance perspective, the application of proper data classification. So however you're deeming sensitive data, again, in your organization, whether it's PII information, PHI, depending again on what type of business or agency you're part of, what's the sensitivity level relative of the information sets that we're dealing with? Having the center of excellence allows you to really get a good wrapper around the way you're going to properly approach these types of projects and initiatives with the proper governance and frameworks in place to support them effectively. From a technology side, again, there's many different aspects of this, but I'll kind of call out a few. One of the areas that's of interest is starting to understand how you control the flows, the data flows specifically, to external AI services. And one of the ways you can do that, right, a lot of this connects in through different APIs. So implementing a API secure gateway is a good way to be able to help better control the actual flows of data to those external AI services. You also want to be able to obviously effectively manage the access into these different systems. And so as an example, you could put a privileged access management type of solution in place to support the handling of the data that's going within those environments as well. Who has access to them, the right privileges are assigned effectively. So again, you're really helping to reduce the risk in associated types of AI implementations and service offerings that your organizations are probably likely starting to spin up if there's not good control mechanisms already in place at this stage. And one of the other areas that we're seeing a lot of strong interest in is, again, how do you get your arms properly wrapped around what data will be used for these different AI projects? And how do you ensure that the data is approved data, going back to data classification, going back to understanding, again, the sensitivity of that data to you and your organization. And one way to do that is, in essence, to kind of create a sandbox or a sanitized based model. So the idea is that you have again, for lack of a better term, a sandbox environment that gets stood up. Your data is being pumped into that environment, and you have now the mechanisms in place, the tooling in place to be able to review, identify where there may be sensitive data in that sandbox environment, and then make decisions, right? So maybe it's data that, yes, belongs to support what the core focus and goal is for that project, but needs to be properly secured and encrypted, as an example. Or maybe you find data that is there and should not be. So now you can effectively remove that data. Point being is that sandbox environment allows you that controlled scope to then decide, okay, we're at a point now where we can actually take that data model and move it forward into our production AI usage tools and support whatever that desired outcome, and project is focused on in a very secured, controlled approach, taking data privacy, taking regulations that could negatively impact you from a cost perspective, penalties and so on, into effect as a high priority as to why you're doing this. And again, those are elements that also get baked into what I was calling out earlier, a center of excellence focused on AI. And then the third element I'll mention here as a way to also consider some areas of how you address shadow AI. This is more focused on data privacy specifically. So you can look and understand, how do we have a way to deal with all this excessive data collection that's likely going on at this point, right? We've seen this just grow so quickly. And so how do you get a better handle on actually what the data is that's coming across and be able to put the proper process in place to support how you minimize the data? So creating basically an AI data minimization approach and having the guidelines for the teams to understand how to work effectively with the right sets of data and not have unneeded data, not just sensitive data, right, but unneeded data and volumes of data in the environment is another key aspect of that. And that helps you tremendously around your data privacy requirements. The other area in data privacy to take into account is also, again, how do you automatically go through this detection of PII information that may be out there in the AI models? And when you do identify them, actioning them, as I was referring to just a little while ago. And one of the ways you can do that is you can go through a discovery mechanism with elements defined that are PII sensitive data elements. As you identify them, you can say, again, maybe this belongs. Now let's go ahead and properly protect that data or secure that data. So we could put in place things around data masking, data tokenization, anonymization as examples. So taking the action effectively at that point in time. Or it could, again, be something that shouldn't even be out there. Let's get rid of it. It's overhead and it's sensitive, by the way, data sets that are going to be very risky for us. And if unfortunately something occurs from a data breach perspective in that environment, shouldn't have been out there in the first place, right? And then the last piece I'll call out around this area of data privacy is also making sure that the data retention control mechanisms are in place, right? Same principles we've used in how you deal with data retention for all sorts of different requirements. Again, regulatory requirements in the past. It's absolutely required and applicable for anything you're doing within your AI projects as well. So that's just to kind of shine a light. Again, it made me think when I was going through and reading some of the areas of focus that came out of the Paris AI Action Summit that took place a couple weeks back, and got me looking into, how are we really dealing with this issue now of shadow AI with the cyber lens on it. So I hope you took away some areas of obviously understanding what the key challenges are, but also more importantly, opportunities where you can actually put some different control mechanisms in place, governance frameworks in place, get your arms better wrapped around this, because obviously it's not going away. It's just going to continue to accelerate. And so hope you enjoyed today's episode. Till next week, have a great time.
Hello, Producer Ben here, and before we leave you, I'd just like to flag up a previous episode of the show so you know what to check out in the Reimagining Cyber back catalogue. Exactly 4 years ago this week, in one of the very first editions of the podcast, we heard from Bob Gay, a cybersecurity leader with over 25 years of experience at the top of the profession. At the time, he was acting CISO at Momenta Pharmaceuticals, and he came on to talk about the importance of getting buy-in from non-technical people in your organisation.
You should be thinking cyber savvy all the time. So I try to make sure that all the training and resources that we have, make sure people understand that the bottom line is that we are helping patients with rare diseases so that they can have a better life. And if we don't do our due diligence, then we might not be able to do that. We might not be able to have clinical trials. We might not be able to have, products that are available for these patients that need it. So trying to focus on that has been dramatic.
That was from episode 7, called Today Everyone Needs to Be Cyber Savvy. Thanks for listening to Reimagining Cyber. We're going to be back next Wednesday. Goodbye.